Hello, Jeando.
Hello, Kevin.
In Alexander's first book, Man's Supreme Inheritance, he has a quote by Leonardo da Vinci, which says you can have neither a greater nor a less dominion than that over yourself. And, people would use words less old-fashioned sounding now. They maybe say things like self-regulation or agency, autonomy, these kind of things. So how does the initial Alexander technique and doing a lesson of conscious guidance and control, how does that help somebody gain more dominion over themselves? How does it help them increase in agency to develop their self-regulation, or as Alexander says, to become to reach a plane of conscious guidance and control?
Yeah. First of all, yes, Alexander is using another word that you've tried to avoid, and I'm not shy. It's the word is the training of the will, or the development of the will. And Alexander, well, for example, in the book you mentioned in Man's Supreme Inheritance, he says that we want to use ordinary will. And so, what do you mean, ordinary will? The will to do, the will to engage into an action, the will to stick to your decisions. All these questions are coming back all the time in the books. So, I've been criticized openly many times because I'm well, a nasty person, which is true, and because I'm using criticism. And of course, I was trained as a modern Alexander technique teacher, as a semantic teacher, as a somatic teacher, and obviously, I can present what we are doing with the initial Alexander technique, but it's important to understand that I need to present it in some sort of opposition to a background. What else is there, on the market, for example? So what I know best is the modern Alexander technique because I was trained as an Alexander technique teacher. So criticism is unavoidable. And I want to justify. So I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to use Alexander's justification. Because Alexander, in his last book, The Universal Constant in Living, all the time he used criticism. And so I'm going to show you the sentence. So he says, in dealing with my subject, criticism is unavoidable. But in my justification, I will point out that in my case, it is solely to the end of attempting to help to a better understanding of the constructive plan I'm offering. Well, you can defend the position, but many teachers that are working with me or would like to work with me are saying, yeah, but it's not inviting. It's repulsive. You're not making your lessons, palatable or alluring and seductive. It's really dark and stark. It's like, wow, what an horrible individual. How would I want to work with a teacher like that? Yeah, it's precisely the point. It's like the behind all this presentation and criticism. You have to understand a constructive plan, and in this constructive plan, there is, of course, a construction of the will. I do present the technique as a construction of the will, so it's going to be necessary to explain what we mean by construction of the will. What is the will? What are the pitfalls? Yeah, and so in putting forth that criticism, I want to go one step further. I think well, really deeply that Alexander made some sort of mistake. He did not really present the technique as a development of the wheel. He presented it as a very fine system to, in fact, improve general functioning. General functioning improvement is a goal, is something, yes, that we want to work for. But placing the goal before the technique is creating all sorts of difficulty when we want to understand the construction or the development of the wheel. So let me be clear about this. I know it's I'm going roundabout ways because I'm not talking of the wheel yet, but you will see that there is a reason for that. So look at the new development. Alexander is presenting his work at the end of his life. This is again a sentence taken from the last book, The Universal Constant in Living. And he's just showing us what he's been doing. So he says, well, I'm reading from the book now. I have in daily lessons for nearly 50 years demonstrated to pupils and others the influence for good or ill of this constant upon their general functioning. And the fact that the repetition of the demonstration is possible provide the kind of proof of the soundness of a concept and principle, and of the technique, plan, or method based upon it, which is acceptable to the scientific engineers when he finds that in working to a concept or principle, he can build a machine that, as a working mechanism, satisfies the need for which he designed it. Okay. So Alexander has spent his time showing that use affects functioning. He has demonstrated it by, in fact, manipulating these students into some form of a shape, some sort of a relationship between the parts that, in fact, well, demonstrate that there is soundness of concept and principle. Yeah, but he's not demonstrating how the student is going to generate this influence of a constant, you know? So when Alexander is manipulating the student, it's what I would call sporadic. That is, the student is coming to his office, he's having a half an hour demonstration that, yes, his organism can be directed in such a way as to, well, give as a result, of course, this use affect functioning realized in practice. That is, the person is going to discover. So there is a story where, for example, Alexander in the wanted to play a prank to a doctor, so he requested one of the patients that was there to be was tested for his heart beating rate. And Alexander just, while the doctor had to go away for a minute, he just manipulated the student. And when the doctor came back and tested the cardiac rhythm, he suddenly turned toward Alexander and said, "What have you done to him?" And what he had done is, of course, expanded the rib cage. So when the rib cage expands, you get, of course, more space for the lungs, so less compression on the heart. So then, obviously, the cardiac rhythm is going to lower. And that was a proof, a demonstration of the importance of the use of the self upon functioning. Well, that is not demonstrating how the student is going to find the will to by himself generate the conditions that are necessary. So clearly, I like today's subject, the development of the will. the construction of the wheel, because that's how I see my sessions. I do want to demonstrate, of course, to the pupil. I want to repeat a demonstration, and the demonstration I want to repeat is not the result. That is a better general functioning because the general use has been improved. I am not here to generate a sporadic improvement of the, well, shape and form of the organism of the pupil. My demonstration is about the fact that the pupil can use his own will. Yeah, but he can use his own will consciously. And when using his own will consciously, he is developing the will. That's the center of my vision at the moment of my job as a teacher. That's what I am working at. So when you do speak about the development of the will, you must understand that when the student arrives, no matter how much how much intellectual work or physical work the pupil has done, we can consider that the will can still be developed. Yeah. In most people, and in young people, obviously, the will to do, can it be intellectual activity or physical activity, anything? Well, the will to do is activated more or less subconsciously. That's one thing. That is the desire, the something that is pushing you to activity is most of the time external, in the sense that I am working to make money. I have to work because I want money. Yeah, this is a subconscious activation of the will. It's like some teachers or some students are telling me, why don't you make your lesson more interesting? You know, they have to be like games. You have to play. Playing is a symptom that the teacher thinks that the lesson has to be made interesting to stimulate the will, the subconscious will of the student. Yeah. If you make it shiny, if you make it, if you activate, well, when I give a talk, for example, what you're looking at is the picture of one page of a book. Well, there is nothing less interesting than that. You hear a voice and you see a picture, and the picture does not even correspond to what I am saying now. Well, yeah, I want you to follow the ideas, not to be stimulated too much by what you see. Yeah. So in most people, the will to do is activated subconsciously, and most people want to be activated. You know, they want to play a game that is making noise, that is showing many images, and you need to have to repeat something to obtain some, well, candy. It's a candy way of teaching. Yeah. Most of the time, this is going to be associated with wasted and inefficient effort. Many people are not really clear about how to organize efficient effort. And again, when we want to find the influence in a constant, there is something is that it's obvious that at first the will is sporadic. We have great intensity and we want to achieve a lot, and then we get tired and we go back to the sofa and we go back to social systems where we are, well, fed with many, many images, many new things all the time. So in the end, the will has to be developed. By that we mean that at first the will is very strong, very explosive for things that are pleasurables, for feelings, for example. People are seeking feeling all the time. And they may be trained to seek feeling. They think that the correct position is associated with the feeling, so they have to find the feeling. Yeah. So that is immediate. That is really something you don't need to reason about. It's not something you need to construct, to organize. No. So habitual will is weak for complex issues that needs combining, that needs organizing, that needs balancing. Yeah. So where the will is best is when it's focused on one thing at a time, and it's also best when we can be sure that we are exerting our will, so that will be associated with some sort of violent burst of activity. Yeah. While this is going on, actions are forced. And the activity is reaching a peak, but at the same time, if you were a psychologist and were observing what's happening in the mind of the person, you will find that the person is in fact mind wandering, going from one thing to the other. There is no structure. There is like wandering means without clear general directions. The little steps the person is taking are not, in fact, thought in advance to represent a real direction. Yeah. So now, what about the conscious direction of the will? Well. For me, lessons of the modern Alexander technique are missing the point. They are, that's where I criticize, of course. They are presenting a solution that is given, and the student has just to follow along. Well, inhibit is unwanted reaction, but follow along and be structured in the proper shape, so that the demonstration of the influence of the use of the general use on the functioning is made, and we expect that the pupil, having had this experience, will want to obtain it again. And so there are so few orders or clear instructions in the Alexander technique. And the ones that are proposed are so vague and presented in inaccurate, if I want to say, syntactic presentation, like let the neck be free. What do you mean? To let the head go forward? Forward from where? From forward, how do you want the forward? Forward and up? Yeah. Relatively to what? Back to lengthen and widen. How do you get the back to lengthen and widen? It's very interesting. So when you finish a session like this, you may have a very nice experience. Your functioning has improved. Yeah. You don't know exactly how it has been done. You felt many hands moving around your head, your neck, your back, your legs, all that. But while all this was going on, well, you were frantically thinking about what was going on, how to reproduce what was going on. And you were subjected to feelings at the same time, very strong feelings. When somebody is manipulating, the power of the hand is really important when it comes to influencing the mind, in the sense that well, it's very difficult to resist feelings. And this is exactly the idea that you will see we will develop when we will talk about mind wandering. Your mind will wander aimlessly from one feeling to the next. And you must understand that it's impossible to link feelings together. You can link instructions, you can link movements, actions. It's an object of the mind that is possible. But in the modern Alexander technique, somatic development, there is no discipline. By discipline, what we mean is that we have a process that is based on the power to understand instruction, the power to link up these instructions together, but also to link up these instructions in order to obey sequences of order. And I can tell you, this discipline is a new subject for most people. Even people that are habitually considering themselves discipline, rich in willpower, they don't understand willpower as the power to understand. They don't understand the willpower as the power to link up or to obey sequence of orders. Yeah. And so what we are looking for in the session about the conscious will, development of the conscious will, it's this idea that to resist mind wandering, conscious will has to be exercised as a constant. It has to be embedded in the background of everyday life and everyday movements. That's why I mostly teach the act of bending. That is, you bend when you sit, you bend when you want to reach something that's on the floor. So you need to understand will in the action of bending. And of course, there is unbending. That is going from bending to standing. It's an activity that is present every day, every time. In order to sit somewhere, well, you have to bend and somehow to unbend. So if you apply your will, your capacity to understand, organize, link up, balance, sequence of orders, and sequence of actions, you're developing the conscious will. And by this process, mind wandering is going to be replaced by sequence of ideas which are brought into focus in combined action. Mind wandering is ideas that have no relations with actions. I wanted to direct your attention toward the book, because of course you can read Alexander's books and try and find where Alexander is talking about the will, but it's a bit as Alexander is always writing here and there, you have some comments on the will, but to get a unified idea of what he's talking about, it's quite difficult. So it can be interesting to go to the source of Alexander's interest in the will and in mind wandering. And it's easy to find. It's a book by John Dewey. What is interesting of the first thing in this book is it's a great book, of course, but no, it's the date of parution. That book was published in 1897, long before Alexander and Dewey met in person. So I think that Alexander met Dewey in writing long before they met. And it's for any Alexander teacher, there is one book, the book I'm talking about is Interested as Related to Will to Do, okay? And so it's exactly the subject of our conversation today. And that book is published in 1897, but there is a book published in 1895 that is Psychology. And I am absolutely certain Alexander read both. So if you're an Alexander teacher or you're interested in Alexander technique on the theoretical level, well, I think it's a very interesting book to read. Yeah. So I've been, of course, influenced by Dewey. I make no, well, I don't want to hide the fact that I read books. I read Vygotsky's books. I read, of course, Dewey's books. And so my understanding of lessons as instrument that the student can use to develop the will, or will inevitably use to develop the will, this is, well, greatly influenced by Vygotsky and Dewey. So for Dewey, let me give you a first taste. So interest as related to will. This is, well, the first chapter is called the development of will. So it's obvious that Dewey noted that students in school or pupils in schools are not really interested in hard subjects. So the question is whether you will see in this in the quote I've chosen, it's clearly presented as a choice between two different concepts. One is the concept of interest, that is making the lesson interesting, and the other one is the idea of effort, that the subject is not really interesting, is not really pleasing to the senses. It requires to work with the mind, and everybody knows that many students don't like that. They prefer to, well, expand their will into things that are providing pleasurable sensation, pleasurable experiences. They are not interested in failing something or trying again at something you've already failed many times. Is wow. And so many times it's thought that, well, the will is the capacity to repeat efforts and bring sheer power of the will to go against the base tendency of wanting pleasurable things. That this is first idea. The second one is the one is opposing to is the interest, is to try and well, create some form of decorum, of background in the session that will make it interesting. Use concrete presentation. I dislike theoretical ones, for example, is an example. So, I'm a teacher. I have a genuine interest in education. Otherwise, I would do some other job, I think. That's how the quote is starting. I'm reading from the book now. So, genuine interest in education is the accompaniment of the identification through action, of the self. So you want to identify through action the self with some object of ideas because of the necessity of that object or idea for the maintenance of self-expression. Yeah, when you start reading, well, complex text like this, the first reaction is, wow, what is he talking about? So let's bring some examples so you understand the first sentence before we go further. So we want to develop an idea. And the idea is that a certain organization of the movement of the parts of the torso and limbs is going to be called use. And that certain organization, if maintained, if it's not sporadic, but if you can make it a constant, will affect general functioning. By general functioning, we mean that your equilibrium will be better. You will have less effort to produce habitual gesture, and you will breathe better, you will swallow better, you will digest better. Your overall readiness to act will be enhanced. Well, that's the goal, okay? That's the idea. Yeah, but for the moment, it's just an idea that it's outside of the reach of most people. They have no idea, no clue how to organize themselves in sitting, in standing, in bending, in habitual actions. No, it's so. How do you generate the deeper intellectual and physical constant capacity to identify? Instead of having an idea that is outside of yourself, you want something, you want to own the idea. You want to, make the idea visible through your activities, through your actions. So for Dewey, it's clear that there is a need not to have just goals that are outside of yourself stimulating you. No, you have to identify, and to identify with some idea, you have to generate actions, a general action. Yeah. Because what he says, that object or idea is absolutely necessary for the maintenance of self-expression. You want to self-express an idea of improved functioning through a new general use of the self. I hope this makes it a bit more understandable. So, effort in this sense, I'm reading again, in which it may be opposed to interest. I explain how effort or interest are opposed as concepts, implies a separation between the self and the fact to be mastered or task to be performed, and sets up an habitual division of activities. So, externally, we have mechanical habits with no psychical end or value, and internally, we have random energy or mind wandering, a sequence of ideas with no end at all, because not brought to a focus in action. Interest, in this sense, in which it is opposed to effort, means simply an excitation of the sense organ to give pleasure, resulting in strain on one side and listlessness on the other. So, once again, it's important to organize our thinking, and so to try to translate what Dewey is presenting as his idea. So, he's presenting will or effort as a solution, but it's the will as it was considered in the 18th, 19th centuries. Okay, we want to master something with effort, and he says there is a separation between the self and the fact to be mastered. The separation can be, because, for example, the organization of the movement is given to a master teacher. So the master teacher is doing the thing and is doing the magic, and you are suddenly feeling different. You're suddenly in the midst of a new psychophysical experience. Yeah, but that's a psychophysical experience in action is separate from you. You're shown something, but you're not given the means to develop that, kind of action. I consider that organizing the expansion of the torso, getting the back to lengthen, the head to go forward and up, and the back to lengthen and wide, and the knees forward and away is a global action. So you have a separation, yes, between the self and the fact to be mastered. When I give a session, it's quite different because the student is on his own. There is a student, he's standing, and we are deciphering what sort of movement have been performed and how the student is now standing, for example. It's a very simple session. And from there, I want to show you how there is a change in the organization of the parts of the torso when the student is suddenly requested to make a gesture with the index to touch the upper lip and the nose. Obviously, the separation still exists in a way because the instruction is given, well, through the earphones or through the system that is conveying the sound to the pupil. Yeah, but the pupil has to understand the order, and the order is not to just create a hook with the index finger and place it under the nose. No. It's a bit more intricate than this. There has to be an organization of the action in order to generate that movement without affecting the position of the knees, the position of the back, the position of the upper torso and head, so that the pupil can be seen to generate an action without, well, stopping to generate several actions. So this is an act of conscious will. The person is, in fact, center of the actions, and this all, what looks like a simple action is absolutely not. You could not imagine how much just lifting an arm can disrupt the general equilibrium of the self. On this picture, unfortunately, it's a very advanced student, and there is very little in sense of getting the lower ribcage forward, unduly lifting the torso, shortening the back. All that does not exist here. You see something that is very, well, it's like non-consequential, it's like usual. Yes, but it's made totally unusual because it's an act of will. And it's an act of will that is conscious in the sense that is absolutely structured. And there are changes. You can see, we can follow how the whole structure is organized above the feet, how the legs and torso are aided and influenced by the force of gravity. This is Alexander's expression. Yeah, and so the focus is always a focus toward actions. There are ideas in the head, but where in the previous image, you remember, it was this idea that the sequence of ideas with no end at all, the mind-wandering energy. That is, I'm thinking about something I feel here, then something I feel there, or I have a scratch, or I'm thinking about, wow, the time is going, I need to accelerate. Well, that's mind-wandering, because all these ideas are not connected, they are not brought to a focus in action. So the student is starting to experience sessions after session this idea of having sequence of ideas that are organized, sequence of ideas that have a goal in practice. Yeah, and so we develop the wheel. It's not something we would like to develop. And most students are not aware that they are developing their will when they practice. Yeah. Let's see many people think that the idea is to obtain a certain shape. They have this idea that you know that a person has will because he's got well-disciplined habits. I do not think so. I do think that the expression here is not an expression of well-disciplined habits. It's an instant solution to a complex problem. So in this case, what you see is a person, a student, performing what is called the door procedure. That was set in writing by Alexander in 1909, sorry. And so the door exercise is a simple exercise where the person has to bend the knee in the new way. That is, instead of bending the knee by bending the ankle, the knees, and the hips, the person is requested to bend the hips and knees only. That is, the ankles are not bending. That is, the person has a new monkey in which we see that the person has been suddenly capable of ordering the action of the pelvis to go back in space. So the hips have moved back in space until the torso is supported by the wall and extending away from the point of contact. This is exactly the sequence as it is described by Alexander. Extending the torso away from the point of contact with the wall. This is the door exercise. And so, in order to obtain this shape, some people say, well, that's what we would call well-disciplined habit. The person is able to do what the teacher has told her to do. And so many people think that this is will. This is the will is the capacity to submit to the orders coming from someone else. In this case, I want to shatter this picture, because if the student was just repeating well-disciplined habits, well, there would be no discipline at all. You will see it's a reasoning, it's a Dewey's reasoning like that. If you have well-disciplined habits, well, there is no discipline. There is no discipline in action at that moment. No, but in order to obtain that shape, you must understand that the pupil has had to, focus on the direction of movement of the hips, but at the same time, the person has had to inhibit the motion of the inferior part of the knee and the motion of the front of the armpit, because that's how the problem is set. We get a vertical line, we call the vertical line of the ankle, and we want the person to be capable of moving back while the inferior part of the knee and the movement of the front of the armpit line are inhibited. And it's not inhibition in some sort of theoretical sense. No, it's real inhibition of action. So for Alexander, inhibiting an action or generating an action are both acts of wills. They are not separated in his mind. Yeah. So it's an act of will not to move the inferior part of the knee back. Well, the only way to obtain in practice that is to generate a direction of movement so that the knee is going forward and away from the hip movement. So when the hip movement is generated, well, you must understand to either bend in the old way, that is bend the ankle first so that the knees is not going to stay in the same place, or if the person starts to be capable of inhibiting the old reaction, a new reaction will take place, and it's not the one we want, because then you will see that the person has the hips movement activated, but the inferior part of the knee movement goes with it. And as a result, the person is not maintaining poise, the person is falling. And so this is not the door exercise. The door exercise, you have to activate, the decision. The decision has to be brought in focus, in action. This is the essence of will. This is what we are looking for in sessions. You know, the person is developing different things that are associated with will. in these pictures. There is this idea of sticking to reasoned decisions. Now we are going to look at what it is to stand from the door exercise. It's absolutely necessary to understand the sequences of actions that are necessary and what are the directions of the different parts of the torso. So as you will see, to start with, there is a problem, because the student has not been capable of maintaining the armpit line front on the vertical. The person is throwing herself forward. So everything is going forward. Well, fine. It's necessary to note for something to become meaningful. For being capable of doing something meaningful, you need to understand, well, the background. And the background here is geometrical. We say, oh, you are throwing the torso forward. Alexander is saying that many people in standing, they have a tendency to throw the torso forward, throwing the lower rib cage. That's what's happening here. It's very little, but we need to understand what is the correct direction of movement. Instead of going forward with the sacrum and going forward with the front of the armpit line, the real game is to oppose the direction of movement so that we have antagonistic action. And so the student is going to try and correct, but as you can see, the inferior part of the knee is going forward. Yeah? It's only at the end that the student is capable to realize in practice the necessary corrective action, so the adjustment that she requires. And the adjustment, as you can see, is to get the lower rib cage back, to get the hips back, and to get, of course, the superior part of the knee backward in opposition to the sacrum. So the development of the wheel necessitates to develop the capacity to stick to reasoned decisions. It's one thing to understand reasoned decisions, while sticking to them is completely different. So the person in development of will has to link verbal description of actions with real combined actions. It's one thing to link the movement in your mind, say, oh, yes, I am going to oppose the direction of the knee forward in a way to the movement of the hips, but I need also to make sure that I oppose the movement of the armpit line front with the movement of the hips. Okay, that's combining verbal description. Well, yeah, but then you have to link these verbal description with combined actions that are, well, expressing in practice the ideas. Yeah. So the person in development of the will will have to, well, start to connect ideas together. It's not separated ideas that are coming, you don't know where from, you don't know what they're linking with, you don't know. No, you have to connect ideas so that create sequences of idea, and you need to connect this sequence of ideas with sequences of action, and you need to make sure that you are, well, effectively performing the action as requested, as indicated in the plan. So there cannot be development of will if there is not a development of planning of actions. And so I do think that one of the main, well, benefit from having initial Alexander technique lesson is not just this feeling of agency that you're starting to be capable of organizing the movement of the parts and stand with the torso and limbs influenced by gravity. So there is a meaningful activity, there is a meaningful result. You will see that in these conditions, it's much easier to generate a step or to breathe or to swallow, anything like this. Yes, but at the same time, you have developed the power of resisting distractions. You have the power of resisting mind wandering. That is, of course, ideas will spring up in your mind all the time. Okay? Yes, but you can still allow that activity or spontaneous activity to take shape or to take form, but at the same time, there is a central core of structured ideas that are there and helping you, guiding your actions. So for today, I think that's the start of a presentation. I really recommend that you read Dewey's psychology or Dewey's book I was mentioning earlier. So interest as related to will, it's a very interesting thing. And for Alexander teachers, they will discover that many of Alexander's ideas about, well, organizing different concepts at the same time all together was already present, yeah, and in Dewey's ideas. Well, what Dewey needed was the practicality of the technique. What is great in the technique is that we are not developing the wheel during the session. We are, in fact, interesting the person to everyday activity where the wheel can be, well, organized. So sitting, for example, standing, bending can become habitual actions that are helping you to maintain a central core of discipline, a central core of will that you can then expand in any direction you feel interesting for your life. Any question?
Yeah, it helps make sense of Alexander's famous quote about anyone can do what I do if they do what I did, but none of you want the discipline.
Yeah.
So this is like, it's not enjoyable often to try and develop your will, the training of it, because your mind is wandering, you'd rather do something else. Sometimes it doesn't feel pleasurable. Pleasure comes in different ways and over long term, but in the moment you can be very nasty in a lesson, as you say. But it's useful also for people to distinguish between what we're talking about here is not like raw brute force willpower. It's more, it's you start with that willpower, but then you use it more skillfully, more intelligently, and like you say, you give it a structure to work with and ideas. And then you kind of channel the energy of your will through the structure, through the plan, and then you have some kind of method of seeing whether you've done what you thought you were going to do. I mean, ideally, you know, Alexander with mirrors, as with video, or just with a teacher, someone pointing out to you, because it's very easy to delude yourself. You think you can feel like you're developing your will and you're doing things, but really it's just a different kind of autopilot. Things are just happening in a different way. And with a lot of the hands-on stuff, that's what happens. You feel different and you confuse it for will. Another thing is that it's different when you're using the will to focus in this work. It's a complex focus rather than the sort of simple single tasking focus you hear often in self-development circles now, where you should only do one thing, you shouldn't do many things. So there's true in one sense that you should have one action that you're working, everything's working towards. But in reality, there's many moving parts. Things are complex. You have to think about many things at once in the same action. And the images you showed there, when the person's just moving, just to when he's taking his finger up to his nose, there's many different moving parts he's aware of, and he's consciously doing at that moment that he's trained over time, and he's doing right now, and preventing other movements, all kind of in reference to things he's seen himself do in video in the past and things you've told him during the lesson. So you're not relying on the brute force will. It's very structured. It's much more intelligent, and it gives, you know, they have this phrase in the meditators, and people have this phrase called monkey mind, you know, where your mind is just jumping around, like you say, or Alexander calls it mind wandering. Well, when you're doing this work, you're giving the monkey something to do. If you're focusing on all these different movements and preventing other movements, you don't have time for a lot of all the random thoughts and things. So But the last thing overall is that how much the will is the you often won't feel pleasure in the moment, but over a longer period of time you do, because you have a kind of more, it's like an intellectual pleasure of being able to turn your ideas into actions, and you make better decisions and things like that. But in the lesson, it can get quite nasty.
Yeah, no, but I think that there is something is that agency is not a pleasure. It's a fulfillment. It's pleasure is like you're thinking about it and say, "Oh, I get pleasure from this." No, when you're in action, and the fulfillment is one of itself. It's like I am doing something that is absolutely worthy, that is valuable, and it's a fulfillment in itself. You don't need to add something. Oh, I get great pleasure out of doing it. Well, when you're acting, you're just doing your thing. That's it. And it gives you this idea is to give you. It's like an instrument, if you want. It's an instrument where you can carry into effect more and more things. Oh, not any grandiose things, but no, but you carry into effect, and it's like a bulldozer. You're pushing your development forward. This interest in education is not just a tiny thing that you get pleasure from. No, no, it's you're discovering new way to solve problem, and you're adding to your toolbox, and it's like well, you're good at it. You derive a sense of self that is different. But do I say it's pleasurable? No, it's fulfilling. I don't know. There is something about pleasurable. It seems that you have to have some icing on the cake. No, the cake is you eat it. You know, it's like you get the energy, you get the direction. You have the energy and you have the direction. Now you just use it. I can spend an hour talking about one sentence. Okay, I like it. It's because I find things. I am in activity. It's the pleasure is afterwards when I think about it. You see, there is no distinction between the instruments and the pleasure. It seems to become one and the same. That's what I would say fulfillment. I feel I represent myself as much more fulfilled now than 20 years ago. And it's because of that work of discipline and the development of the will and the structuration of the will. I'm not sure
There really isn't that many methods for training and developing the will. Not really, not in a skillful way like we're talking about.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people telling people to do it, like you can just wake up and have more agency one day. It's absurd. Like you ask someone
Yeah.
to do a basic movement experiment and they can't, they don't have the will to prevent one simple movement while they're standing up or whatever, including like ourselves when we do it. And it's like delusion that people think how easily they could change these things, or if they wanted to they could, they just don't want to yet.
Only. Yeah.
Or they do something and then they think they're like, they feel like they're in charge of themselves now, but really, and then they watch a video later and see that they weren't doing at all what they thought they were doing. So you couldn't have been in charge of yourself when you did that.
Oh, so you agree that the lessons are about the training of the will. That's a good end for that session. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so cool. So if anybody wants to try out a nasty lesson with Jeando and learn how to train and develop their will, you'll find links underneath to his Facebook and to his website with his email address. And so thank you, Jeando. We'll see you everybody in the next video.
Thank you, Kevin. Bye.
Bye-bye.